Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the Franklin Pierce University United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Assessment. This project is part of a larger effort the university is undertaking under the leadership of Associate Vice President for Student Financial Services, Ken Ferreira. And this is part of the strategic planning process for Pierce at 60. Many groups of faculty, staff, and students are involved with collecting data and making recommendations in the 9 goal areas the university has targeted. Students in this class, ES 240, Creating Sustainable Communities, learned about the 17 United Nations goals, and then they were tasked with assessing FPU's progress in the 4 goal areas shown here. They broke these goals down into specific objectives and then gathered data from all corners of the university to evaluate progress. Please note this class is still awaiting results of the FPU Sustainable Development Goals survey. So in some cases, they've used the class's own survey responses as a placeholder. With that, I will turn it over to the first group.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria, and I'll be speaking a little bit about Goal 3.1, as will Addison later in the presentation. Goal 3.1 is empower and promote the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, irrespective of age, sex, disability, race, ethnicity, origin, religion, or other status. The university has created a mission and vision statement around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of the beliefs of the university are in the intrinsic worth, of every person, and the value of diversity and inclusion, that our differences, perspectives, experiences, backgrounds strengthen our community, and that Franklin Pierce University is a place where all are welcome, but our values and beliefs are not limited to those. Next slide, please. Objective 1, we identified as educate students on diversity, equity, and inclusivity through events, clubs, and other opportunities outside the curriculum. So we discovered that around 40% of clubs or organizations promote DEI. There's around 22 clubs and organizations in total. So some of those clubs include Hope Happens Here, Sistas, and the Gay Straight Alliance. The ES 240 class survey questioned the university offers enough clubs and groups to support people of all identities. About 12.5% of our class disagreed, while 58% agreed and 30% were unsure. And the class of 2022 and 2021 have put on events that promote DEI, as well as the Women in Leadership Program, the FPU Institute for Climate Action, and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Next slide, please. Objective 2, inform students of scholarship opportunities. So from December 9th till March 1st, 31 emails were sent out on behalf of Franklin Pierce to inform students about scholarship opportunities. The general scholarship application is open to all students, though many donors wish to award funds to the neediest students, the students who have the most financial need. Students are informed by email. The applications are emailed 3 times a week beginning in December, and the links are always available on the Franklin Pierce financial aid page. Franklin Pierce non-affiliated scholarship links are on the page, as well as the alumni office promotes the alumni scholarship application. Next slide, please. Objective 3, increase student participation in groups and clubs that promote DEI through detailed club organization promotion. So club promotion of DEI and current student participation, we were not able to get all this data, but JAW, around 56 active members. That is a club with a lot of student participation. Hope Happens Here, there are around 30 members signed up, but only 10 to 15 active members. And Alana has 4 active members. Next slide, please. Objective 4, ensure access to and detailed promotion of the Center for Academic Excellence, which provides support for alternatively abled students. So this center makes education available for all learners through many different services that they offer. There are disability services, and since January of 2021, 270 students have been accommodated in all campuses, while 19 are helped daily. There's also peer tutoring and the writing center that works out of the Center for Academic Excellence and the Center Scholar program. And students are informed from communication from staff through classes, and this is very important for the center to keep running. And Tracy Cohen makes students aware of all these services offered. Next slide, please.
So our fifth objective is hiring more professors who are part of minority, racial, and ethnic groups. And we found that university-wide, we have 27 full-time faculty part of a racial, minority, ethnic group and 21 part-time. And this is beyond the Ringe campus. And then we found that on the Ringe campus, staff who identified themselves as a minority race or part of a minority race or ethnic group was 12 part-time faculty and staff and 22 full-time. And then kind of going along with this objective, we wanted to see what kind of training the university offers for faculty and staff on minority and ethnic culture. And so far we have discrimination and harassment training, which is required by all new hires, avoiding bias training. And then this year's student affairs included more inclusion and diversity training, and faculty had to go through a gender identity and pronoun training this year. Next slide, please. Then our sixth objective was to ensure that the campus has a diverse student population that represents minority groups. So below is kind of a graph that lays that out. And as you can see that the majority of students here are white or African American. So I think that's somewhere that we could kind of expand on in the future when it comes to admissions. Next slide, please. Then objective 7 is provide infrastructural accessibility on campus for students of all physical capabilities. And so we really didn't receive a lot of data on this, partially because it wasn't really permissionable, but we did get some data from the survey. And on the question, my campus is accessible to people of all physical capabilities, 50% strongly disagreed, 20% were neutral, and 30% agreed. So overall, I think we could do a lot better job of making sure we have structures availability for all students, regardless of their physical capability, and have more data on that as well. Next slide, please. So our 8th objective was incorporating race, gender, socioeconomic status, intellectual disability into curriculums. And so while we were unable to find all courses that had these kinds of values included in the curriculum, we were able to determine which professors specifically that we know of include them in their coursework. And those professors include Donna Decker, Verna DeLauer, Jessica Landis, an Introduction to Women's Studies, Verna DeLauer in Health, Human Rights, and Environmental Justice and Women's Studies, Doug Challenger in Introduction to Sociology, Alan Racklin in Race and Ethnicity, Jean Dawson in Gender, Race, and Crime, Len Crossman in Police Work, Seamus Pender in Experiencing Race, Class, and Gender in the United States, Identity, Power, and Change courses, Robert Goodby in Human Origins, and then Jed Donnellan. Next slide, please. Finally, this slide includes our ratings and recommendations for the school on DEI values, and we gave the school a 3 out of 5, and we kind of recommend that the school opens the floor for more conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, ensuring that students, faculty, and staff understand the true meaning, implement a more direct way for students to express their opinions and concerns, and provide a larger emphasis on the value of club involvement on this campus. And so we kind of had that conclusion just because there was a lack of data on a lot of the things that we were kind of looking for within this goal. And so I think the school needs to do a lot better job of ensuring clarity between students and administrators. If the data is available, it should be transparent to students. So that's kind of why they got that rating. And then our final slide is all of our references. Thank you.
So we had goal 5, protect and conserve water. 5.1 is provide healthy and sufficient water supplies on all campuses. 5.2 was eliminate release of hazardous materials and ensure state-of-the-art wastewater treatment on all campuses, include hazardous and chemical pollution. 5.3 was increase water use efficiency and reduce the per capita use of water. 5.4 was participate in local and regional efforts to protect and restore aquatic resources and watersheds and to improve water and sanitation management. Next slide.
Goal 5.1 was to provide clean and healthy water to all campuses. Ringe campus maintains its own water supply from 4 different groundwater wells. Franklin Pierce University also tests for bacteria, lead, and copper. And we have installed pre-filters to remove iron and chlorine from the main water source. Next slide. Ringe has had 3 past violations in the past 6 years. The first one being non-acute MCL violation, more specifically known as coliform, January 6th in 2015, which means that there was an excess of bacteria in the water, and if anyone ingests it, it can cause severe health issues. There was also an excess of chlorine in the water, and if exposed to that, it can cause a fluid buildup in the lungs, which is pulmonary edema. There was also a groundwater discharge permit violation, which we're still waiting on the data. We researched 4 other campuses and saw how they filtered out their water, what things they'd look for before providing clean water. Goodyear, Arizona, Lebanon, New Hampshire, and Manchester, New Hampshire all use city water. They all test for bacteria, lead, and copper, as well as other contaminants. There were no violations in the past 5 years for Goodyear, Arizona, Lebanon, or Manchester, New Hampshire. However, we'll be looking in the future. Next slide.
Okay, so for goal 5.2, eliminate access of hazardous materials and ensure state-of-the-art wastewater treatment on all campuses. So FPU has a system for the collection and disposal of hazardous waste from all sources on campus. There have been no violations of hazardous waste laws, and FPU has created or manifested 6,970 pounds of hazardous waste, total quality from 7/21/2016 to 11/23/2020. And most of this is from the science labs and wastewater treatment plants. Next slide. So another goal was treat wastewater effectively. All wastewater,
Treat wastewater effectively. So a way of doing this is all wastewater either goes to the wastewater treatment plant or the Lakeview septic system. Permits required to run this wastewater effectively are the NPDES, National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, the Clean Water Act. Violations at the FPU campus. 3 years ago, there was a violation which required a equipment replacement to resolve the problem. And then when students returned after COVID, the increase in water usage led to a few short-term violations, which got addressed and now is back to running normally with no violations. And then finally, the Lakeview septic system is not functioning properly right now and is being replaced. Next slide. For this is a graph on people's opinion on water quality. And from this graph, we can conclude that 54 students have concerns with the taste of water on campus. Next slide.
Okay, so continuing on with goal 5.2 with the eliminating the release of hazardous materials and ensure state-of-the-art wastewater treatment on all campuses. One of our objectives was to add more areas for purified water on campus. So currently FPU has 3 LK water bottle fillers on campus, and the annual usage for water bottles saved in the bubble, it's 79,943 water bottles saved. In Marcasella Hall, it's 4,079 water bottles saved, and in the cafeteria, it's 18,669 water bottles saved. Next slide.
So for goal 5.3, increase water use efficiency and reduce per capita use of water. So install technology that uses less water, 1 low flow shower heads, 2 toilets that use less water to flush, and then 3 faucet aerators. So all dorm buildings have low flow shower heads unless taken off and replaced by the students. And some toilets use less water to flush, but we're waiting for research. And all dorm buildings have faucet aerators. Next slide.
Reduce the per capita use of water on FPU. Franklin Pierce withdraws drinking water from groundwater wells located in Ringe. The numbers for wells 14, 13, 12, and number 8, there were 18,811,000 gallons of water used in 2016, 19,938,000 gallons of water used in 2017, 17,732,000 gallons of water used in 2018, 15,027,000 gallons used in 2019, and 11,850,000 used in 2020. Next slide. The 2016 per capita was 8,890 gallons per Franklin Pierce student. The 2017 per capita was 9,430 gallons. 2018 was 8,380 gallons. 2019 was 7,100 gallons. And 2020 was 5,600 gallons per student. Next slide.
So for goal 5.4, participate in local and regional efforts to protect and restore aquatic resources and watersheds and to improve water and sanitation management. So for this goal, work with the Pearly Pond Association to reduce the amount of phosphorus in Pearly Pond. The FPU works with the Pearly Pond Association to improve water quality in the lake. And the Pearly Pond Watershed Restoration Plan, they know that they have an issue with the phosphorus in the lake, which causes algae blooms. So they're trying to fix that. And most common sources of phosphorus in the lake include stormwater runoff, which is 40%, groundwater, which is 18%, wetland wastewater release, which is 17%, and geese, which is 10%. Next slide.
So continuing on with goal 5.4, one of our objectives was to reduce stormwater runoff in Pearly Ponds. Currently, no herbicides or pesticides are used. We have some drainage systems located throughout watershed and culvert crossings in minor towns, but for the most part, FU has the most infrastructure on our campus. The Franklin Pierce campus owns and maintains storm drain network, which collects and discharges stormwater runoff from campus to the ponds. And in our newer parking lots on campus and buildings, we have rainwater retention basins. And another objective was to find solutions to control erosion. So currently on campus, erosion is a problem near the four corners and by the back road leading down to the bubble. Next slide.
So also to conduct trash cleanups around campus many times a semester, ideally 15 times a semester, averaging once per week. We are waiting for information from facilities and athletics on the number of times trash cleanups occur per year. Next slide. So also with 5.4, so the Pearly Pond Association is a nonprofit. It's the residents are trained to take samples and learn what to look for in the samples and tests. They are to monitor water quality, and FPU has 2 grants specifically. Grant 1 is the Pearly Pond Restoration Plan, which is how to get the phosphorus out of the lake. And the second grant is to start implementing the plan, which is the most cost-effective option. But some of the things that we have done so far are install phosphorus filters, goose management, and they also created a rain garden erosion project and worked with the neighbors to maintain septic systems. Next slide.
So we gave, for reading recommendation, we gave goal 5 3 stars, and our recommendations for Franklin Pierce is to adjust sand filters or add more filters to reduce the input of phosphorus in pearly ponds. The second recommendation was to implement systems to reduce stormwater runoff, such as permeable pavements or rain gardens. And our last recommendation was to fix the color of tap water by finding a balance between chlorine and iron. Next slide. And then these are just a list of our references. Next slide.
So regarding waste, Franklin Pierce University has identified 3 goals to reduce waste on the Ringe campus. Goal 6.1 strives to minimize the environmental impacts of all campus operations. Goal 6.2 targets the university's responsible consumption and production of products. And goal 6.3 is designed to limit air pollution along with hazardous, chemical, and solid waste. Data collected and used was prior to the fall semester of 2020, taking into account for COVID-19. Next slide. Goal 6.1 aims to minimize the overall environmental impacts of all campus operations. Office paper used at Franklin Pierce University is comprised of 30% recyclable materials. In addition, the use of technology has reduced the need for office paper. There is no policy to purchase recyclable materials, but there are attempts to be environmentally conscious. The university in general buys materials locally from the New England area. The purchasing of non-toxic materials is refrained from unless there isn't a viable substitute. Next slide. Franklin Pierce uses surveys to gauge student knowledge on the impacts of material manufacturing, use, and disposal. Based on recent survey data, 87.5% of students have taken a course covering material manufacturing or disposal. From the same survey data, the majority of students were unsure about how to properly dispose of hazardous and toxic materials. Next slide.
Franklin Pierce makes a concerted effort to reduce the use of mops, towels, and buckets to limit waste. The university uses a sustainable chemical alternative called EarthSense by the National Chemical Laboratory, which is used for most chemical jobs. Franklin Pierce is no longer employing the use of splash chemicals. Using bathroom cleaners containing ammonium chloride, although unsustainable, are used due to the cost-effective nature. Next slide. Goal 6.2's intent is to aid the responsible production and consumption of unsustainable products while making concentrated efforts to switch to sustainable products. To lower the use of plastic products, Franklin Pierce, prior to the fall semester of 2020, has limited plastic bag use in the dining hall. The university has 23 water bottle refill stations spread throughout the Ringe campus, discouraging the one-time use of plastic water bottles. The Franklin Pierce bookstore also sells cheap, reusable water bottles and bags. Next slide. To avoid the use of toxic paints and materials, Franklin Pierce uses low levels of volatile organic compound paints and non-toxic spray foams for installation. Local labor is used for subbed out projects, and material durability is valued to diminish the amount of materials needed. There is a detriment for unsustainably harvested wood, but no stated policy exists for buying sustainable materials. Next slide.
Goal 6.3, as previously mentioned, aims to reduce different forms of waste on the Ringe campus. In an effort to diminish food waste, Franklin Pierce has incorporated several self-serve stations. Franklin Pierce also bases the portion size on the meal's suggested nutritional value. Pre-wrapped food, if not taken, is stored for later use. Next slide. In terms of recycling construction material, the university purchases recyclable paints with low levels of VOC, otherwise known as volatile organic compounds. Metals used in construction are recycled, with the exception of copper and brass, which are weighted and sold. Next slide. Franklin Pierce maintains 2 large recycling containers, one by the campus center and the second behind the facilities building. The location of these containers have been determined as the optimal points on campus. These common misconceptions listed about what can be recycled can cause an increase in the level of contamination in the recycling containers and ultimately become counterintuitive to the entire process of recycling. Next slide. Based on the research conducted into the assessment of waste on the Ringe campus, Franklin Pierce University practices a variety of implicit efforts to achieve a sustainable community. However, few official policies exist, which garners a rating of 2 stars on the institutional assessment scale. Recommendations for the encouragement of recycling include a greater number of recycling containers or creating incentivized competitions to promote recycling. In addition, food reduction ideas consist of the creation of a meal sign-out sheet and an increase of the number of self-serve stations post-COVID-19. Next slide. Our references were taken from several audits, a Franklin Pierce survey, and several emails and interviews. Thank you.
So the next goal was goals 6.4 and 6.5, which are protect the native biodiversity by protecting and restoring the university-owned natural areas on campus, and also providing sustainable public access to natural areas for everyone to enjoy. Next slide. So the first objective was to inventory the biodiversity on campus lands and to protect any endangered species. So there has not been a comprehensive biodiversity inventory done on campus. There is a list of vertebrates and vascular plants, which is, there were 166 vertebrates and 190 plants found as of 2003, but this list is out of date and incomplete, and it is missing several species that have been cited on campus regularly. There are 2 species of threatened or vulnerable animals on campus, including the wood turtle and northern long-eared bat, but does not seem to be a stated protection program for them, and they're only known through word of faculty. Next slide. So objective 2 was increased knowledge and use of campus trails in a way that does not negatively affect biodiversity. So there is a map on Raven Nation that provides the trails and directions to them. We are awaiting survey results on how many students actually know or use them. So trails are maintained by hand to prevent pollution whenever necessary, and to protect the biodiversity, only invasive species are removed whenever possible. In the past, old trails have been moved out of wetlands in order to preserve them. And the trail cleaning group creates habitat with brush piles and also clears deadfall in order to broaden biodiversity. Next slide. Objective 3 was decrease the number of invasive species that are on campus and prohibit the planting of new invasive species. So there are at least 18 different invasive species of plants and animals on campus. Major ones include glossy buckthorn, multiflora rose, and Phragmites. And 3 or 4 of them are found in campus plantings and gardens. So there have been no maps or complete surveys of the invasive species on campus. There is no list of them anywhere. They are known just through mostly environmental staff. And some species, though not through surveys, but they have been observed to have increasing numbers, such as Phragmites in some of our wetlands. And there is no stated policy for planting or prohibiting planting of invasives or encouraging planting of natives in campus gardens or landscaping. Faculties just consult, or facilities consult with faculties about what plants should be planted. Next slide. Objective 4 is educate staff, faculty, and students on native wildlife species and our impact on them. Currently, there are about 12 classes that are taught relating to native wildlife, so plants and animals, and 1,080 students have taken these classes in the last 3 years, which is only about 15 or 16% of students enrolled at FPU during those years. Next slide. Objective 5 is to manage logging in a way that doesn't negatively affect biodiversity. So there is logging done on the Ringe campus grounds, and there have been approximately 6 logging events since 1987. Trees are selected using a combination of group and single tree selection methods in a way to maintain a mix of forest age classes. However, loggers have cut into educational research plots on campus several times, and there's no posted management plan for forestry. The last one was from 1986. Next slide. Objective 6 was create policies that prohibit development or alteration of land important for ecological, educational, or aesthetic purposes. So currently there is a 46-acre conservation easement on the wetlands behind Lakeview. And there has been a proposition to do another conservation easement on 250 acres of land south of Route 119. So forestry, trails, and a small educational building would be allowed, but no development or roads in order to protect the ecologically valuable habitat. Next slide. So our overall rating for the school was 2 stars. And our recommendations were to develop an official land use plan that identifies and protects sensitive species and ecosystems, such as endangered species. Create a plan for management and removal of invasive species, including regular surveying that prioritizes the most widespread and aggressive invasives, and develop policies to prioritize native plantings in gardens, landscaping, and restoration. And we only gave 2 stars because there are a lot of invasives on campus, and there's not a lot of policies in regards to invasives and other parts involved with protecting biodiversity. Next slide.
So our group had goal 7, which is climate action. There are 3 main sub-goals within this goal. Firstly, to improve energy utilization on campus as measured by a lower BTU per student and a lower BTU per square foot. The second is to increase the amount of renewable energy generated on campus. And the third is to measure campus-wide greenhouse gas emissions from all sources and implement measures to reduce or offset emissions. This includes transportation, building, and energy use. Next slide, please.
Goal 7.2, Objective 1, amount of electricity now that comes from renewable energy. Franklin Pierce has a greenhouse and a small solar panel on it that powers the outlets in the greenhouse. This is used to charge phones and laptops. Right now, we have no on-campus renewable energy, but off-site we get about 31% of our energy from hydro and renewables, including wind, biomass, and solar. For the future, there are solar panels being built on the field house right now, and after 1 year, it should produce 184,900 kilowatts of energy generated. This is about 4% of electricity produced. Next slide. Objective 1, update greenhouse, goal 7.3, objective 1, update greenhouse gas inventory for the Vinch campus. FU has a greenhouse gas inventory. It was last updated in 2015. They used to update it every year since 2009, but it hasn't been updated. The data that is shown on that is collected from purchasing, facilities, dining, environmental science, and data on propane, heating oil, gas, pellets, electricity, land sequestration, wastewater, waste, and other waste were collected. This data was collected for the fiscal years 2009 to 2012, and then again 2014 to 2015. Next slide.
So for goal 7.3, objective 2, it was maintain and implement a climate action plan. There were 2 climate action plans made, one in 2010 and one in 2016. The first climate action plan in 2010 had 3 goals. The first goal was to eliminate an upgrade of inefficient energy use, which some has been implemented. Goal 2 was assess and upgrade inefficient energy use, which was implemented. And goal 3 was energy conservation through behavioral change. The climate action plan of 2016 had many things that had been involved, and some have been implemented, like library LED lighting and greenhouse office window glazing. Next slide, please.
So objective 3 and 4, 3 and 5 go hand in hand. Objective 3 is reduce the amount of gas used for personal vehicles on campus by implementing carpooling group chats and increase the use of the shuttle. And then objective 5 is implement electric car chargers. Based on the survey data just from our class, which is kind of the best case scenario data, 75% of students in the class carpool often. 45.8% of students use alternative methods of transportation, such as walking or biking, and 68.75% of students never use the shuttle. And that could be accounted because of COVID and there's limited seatings, and also the schedule for the shuttle has been unclear. Fortunately enough, the 2021 Franklin Pierce Solar Panel Project includes the first electric car charging station on campus, and that will be accessible to students, faculty, and people in the area. And you can see below just how much CO2 emission we'd be saving. Next slide, please.
So for goal 7.3, objective 4, it was install more efficient boilers to generate heat with less fossil fuels. In 2010, there was an upgraded boiler in Peterson Hall, and the Bubble and Granite Hall switched to biomass boilers, which are wood pellet boilers. This reduces GHG emissions. And in the future, we're considering heat pumps for heating and cooling, which have been talked about. The heating around campus includes propane, heating oils, gasoline, pellets, and diesel. For this, the target area would be heating oil reduction and propane use in the bubble, since the bubble has the most propane used throughout the campus. As this graph shows, you can see that the oil in red had decreased and then has been increasing over time. Next slide.
For goal 7.3, objective 6 is to reduce energy use in all buildings, mainly through the addition of heat monitoring devices, new heat distribution units, and insulation in new windows. And there has been a very limited number of renovations to the Franklin Pierce campus, with the majority of energy saving technologies being added to the main buildings, Lakeview, Sawmill, and Northwood apartments, with minimal additions to the freshman and sophomore residences. And the technologies that were installed into these buildings were thermostats, which are controlled by faculty, and newer fan systems, which are used to create more efficient air circulation. Next slide.
Objectives 7 and 8 go hand in hand, both having to do with the lighting on campus. Objective 7 is switching to LED lighting, and Objective 8 is implementing motion sensors. Both the bubble and the library have been converted to LED lighting, which reduces energy use by 4.7% and 60% respectively. Conversion of just the bubble alone saves 41 metric tons of carbon dioxide. There are further plans to convert Marcusella Hall and the athletic field lights to LED. There are 14 motion sensors on campus that control either LEDs or fluorescence. This technology can reduce energy consumption by 35 to 45%. Next slide, please.
Goal 7.3, Objective 9 is to educate students, faculty, and staff about ways to reduce energy use and why. Goal 7.1, which goes hand in hand with our Objective 9, is to decrease energy use on campus by measure 15% BTU per student by 2025. Focusing on Objective 9, educating people on ways to reduce energy use ultimately does reduce energy use. Enrollment in courses that teach ways to reduce energy use has gone up since our 2018 to 2019 school year, with 2018-2019 having 105 students, 2019 to 2020 having 235 students, and 2020 to 2021 having 203 students. The numbers from the most recent school year could also be affected by COVID-19 seating protocols. Goal 7.1 to decrease energy use. According to Franklin Pierce University's website, there were 1,400 traditional undergraduate students on the Ringe campus in 2015, and basing off the 2006 Campus Energy Conservation Assessment, the university uses approximately 4.6 billion BTU per year in energy, which is above average. And completing the calculations, that calculates to about 32.5 million BTU per student if we base it off those numbers. And in order to decrease those numbers by 15%, we would have to drop to 27.7 billion BTU per student by 2025. Next slide, please. Based off of all the data we've collected, our group rates goal 7 as 2 stars. And we recommend that the school uses only renewable energy and that they explore the use of heat pumps to heat and cool buildings using electricity, and replace all lights with LEDs and install motion sensors. Next slide.
Okay, thank you to all our presenters and to all our researchers, and thanks everyone who's listening. All this information will be updated with the final survey results, and the final written report will be delivered to the Sustainable Development Goal Assessment Committee. If you've noticed any inaccuracies, we really need the corrections. So please, if you have any questions, comments, or corrections, please direct them to me, Catherine Koning, and I will get them to the students. Thank you all for attending. And I think with that, we are all done.